All right, guys, welcome to our first photo shoot. Now, for this shoot, we wanted to create images that Niall could use on like his LinkedIn profile, social media accounts, just a general nice representation of who Niall is. So we focused a lot of energy on just making a like natural photo. And when you have someone doing something in a photo, that focus is on that action. So those tend to kind of take care of themselves. But when you're just focusing on the person and they're looking like either at the camera or slightly away, those tend to be just a little bit harder to get to look natural. So that was the main goal here. So we are going to be building up our athletic type lighting, but the main focus here was getting a photo of him that feels like Niall, you know, not like, oh, I'm posing for the photo. Just feels like, okay, cool. I understand who that person is from this photo. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at our photo shoot. We're going to break down the lighting. You get to see some of the cool techniques we use for getting Niall to be nice and relaxed. And then we'll look at our retouching for these images. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So now it's time for our next shoot in this series. For these images, we photographed Niall on a pink background. He and I talked beforehand, and he's like, "Pink's my favorite color. I love pink." So we were like, "Well, I really like pink too. So let's go ahead and photograph you on a pink background." We're like, "Okay, pink is a bright enough color. We don't need any other colors kind of like distracting from that." So we've got a relatively neutral wardrobe here. We've got some jumping photos and then some photos on the ground, some things that are going to like, you know, show his athleticism and things that he can kind of use as like standout images for social media and for his website. So the main focus here is on like nailing those poses. So while shooting, just making sure that like I hit each of those movements like at their fullest extension. If you catch them like too far before or too far afterwards, it's not going to look that good. So we're going to go through, we'll break down all of our lighting that we used. We changed the lighting up because some of these shots he's like higher up in the air and some of them he's on the ground. So we need to change our lighting ratios because we're using a softbox above us. So obviously less powerful when he's in the air and more powerful when he's on the ground. So the equal amount of light will reach him in both of those things. And then once we're done with the photo shoot, we're going to take two primary images and then we're going to go back and forth just a little bit and show you guys how to make them into a series of photos. And then at the end, we're going to add some graphics, just some like abstract type shapes to these images. This is a totally optional thing. We'll show you how to do all of that coming up right now. Okay guys, welcome to our last shoot in this series. Now these images are with Niall and a medicine ball. So we're actually using the same exact lighting setup here that we used for the shots we did earlier when we had the pink background. So we've got our softbox above our subject, we've got our strip boxes to the left and the right, and we've got our softbox down below. Now, unfortunately, we did actually film this entire thing, but unfortunately that footage was lost, which we're all super sad about. But we do have all of the retouching, and the retouching is going to be really fun. So we're going to show you guys how to edit a couple of images in a series, and this is super cool because what we're going to do is we're going to actually edit 3 images at the same time. So it's like make a change here, 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 ripple it across all 3. And this is something that you'll probably wind up having to do in your career is, you know, like a series of images. And you want to make sure that all of the images in the series really do look like one another. We're also going to be doing some really interesting things with our coloring. The cool thing about the coloring is that we're able to basically click and drag and apply the same coloring from one image to another in the series. So although we do have like pretty cool stylized coloring, it's the exact same for every single image in the series. So they really do look like they all are part of a series. And I think the fact that we're going to edit 3 images at the same time, I think that's going to be a lot of fun too. So thanks so much, guys. I hope you enjoy this retouching tutorial. Welcome to our third shoot with Niall. For these images, we wanted a little bit more like gritty, close-up, detailed type images. And if I was just doing one photo with Niall, I probably wouldn't have done just this photo. But built into the series of all the other photos, I think this works really great. These are meant to be kind of like he's in his workout and we're kind of capturing him in that. So we're going a little bit darker with our lighting. We start off with a black background and then I actually pull that out for some of the images so we can get some of the natural elements in our studio. We hung the rings from the ceiling, so he's actually like doing pull-ups here, and I'm spraying him with just a spray bottle full of water to make it look like he's dripping sweat, which is super fun. Then in the retouching part of this tutorial, we're going to take like some of the background lights and just add a nice glow to them. We're going to make it super gritty, so we're going to show you some really interesting things with sharpening, and then we're going to do some great color work. And I don't know about you, but I tend to over color things when I'm like, ooh, let's put some like color into the shadows and the highlights. I tend to overdo it. So we're going to go through basically the entire process, show you a bunch of different ways to color these types of photos. I'm going to take a quick break in the tutorial and then come back and finish it up, which I recommend doing, especially when you go in there and like start changing shadows and midtones and highlight color, especially with skin tones. You really want to make sure that those come out great. So really fun, super gritty shots, very different from the rest of the shoot, but I'm glad we have it in this tutorial. So I hope you enjoy it. Let's get on to our photo shoot. Hey guys, and welcome to Studio Lighting and Retouching for Athletes. Hey guys, and welcome to the Studio Lighting and Retouching for Athletes. This is going to be a really fun tutorial. Now, I'm personally very excited because I get to work with my good friend Niall, and he's a health coach, and he also does rehabilitation. And I've worked with Niall. He's a friend of mine, but he's also like helped me with my own body. I broke my ankle a couple of years ago, and after a couple training sessions with him, all the pain has totally gone away. So thanks, Niall. That was a really big help. So I wanted to include a few different things in this tutorial. One is a little bit of the client relationship side. Everyone these days needs great images they can put on social media, they can put on their website, and just things for marketing in general. So a big part of this was getting images that Niall could use for his marketing and things that are going to fit in different applications. So we've got a shot on a white background. We wanted to get a standard studio headshot basically. In this case, he is an athlete, so we wanted to make sure it has a little bit of athletic lighting in there, but this is something he can use on his social media or his About Me page. We also wanted to get some different action shots that he could kind of use for his social media type stuff, hey, look at this really cool, interesting photo. Hopefully it'll draw people into his business. We've got some really nice portraits on a black background with a medicine ball, and then we've got some stuff on some gymnastic rings. So we've got a bunch of different photo shoots we're going to be going through in this tutorial. Through all this, you'll be able to learn client relationship things. Obviously, we're going to go through all the lighting and all the retouching as well. So we're going to have a great time in this tutorial. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. All right, guys, welcome to our shoot. This is my good friend, Niall. So awesome to be working with you today.
Likewise.
And we're basically just gonna go through a athletic type portraiture shoot. And so I wanted to start off, just kind of talk about what you do. So personal training, nutrition coaching, what else?
And rehabilitation.
Rehabilitation, and that's what you've been helping me with. I broke my ankle a while ago. I just had a lot of pain there. It was my back was suffering because of it too. And yeah, I'm all better now. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
It really made a big difference. Niall, apart from being a friend of mine, is also, you've got your own small business. You know, you're self-employed. And so as a part of that, in today's digital age, you need images. So Niall and I kind of just work together. It's just okay, cool. You fix my body and I'll take pictures of you.
Deal.
The first thing we want to do is get our camera plugged into the right settings, and then we can kind of get all of our lights kind of talking around those settings. So basically you got your ISO, you got your shutter speed, and you've got your aperture. So ISO, you pretty much just want to keep that as low as possible. We are in a studio setting, and just to keep your lights from having to work super hard, I'm going to set my camera at ISO 200. And that's just going to give us a pretty good baseline. Now, when it comes to our shutter speed, you want that to be as fast as possible while still maintaining what's known as sync speed. It's a little bit technical, but basically when you're using a modern digital SLR, your shutter is coming down, and if you shoot with a shutter speed that's too fast, you're actually going to see the shutter in your pictures. So you want to just check with the manufacturer of your camera. Most cameras, the max shutter speed you can sync external flashes with is around 1/200th of a second. So just check your camera manufacturer. I usually shoot at 1/160 just to be sure. So I already know pretty much that my ISO is going to be at 200 and my shutter speeds is at 1/160. And then the only other decision that I have to make is like, do I want a very shallow depth of field? Like, do I want just Niall's, nose to be in focus and his arm to be out of focus? That's a stylistic choice. If that was the case, then I would shoot with a super open aperture like f2.0. In this case, for like sports type of things, we want a little bit wider of a depth of field here. I want to make sure that you're completely in focus from front to back. It's going to make sure we can capture the most amount of detail. If he's got, like sweat or anything like that, it's all going to like come into focus. So we're going to shoot with a little bit deeper depth of field. So I'm going to be shooting for about f8 or f11. So that's all kind of stuff that you can figure out ahead of time. Now, when you're out in the world and, taking pictures in constant lighting, changing conditions, totally different story. But when you're in a studio, you're controlling all the light. So you can just choose exactly your camera settings and then just make your lights work for those camera settings, which is kind of fun. Quick little note, you want to shoot in manual mode. So I'm going to just go over to the camera, punch in all those settings, and then basically we're going to start getting all of our lights working with those exact settings. All right, guys, we're ready to move on to our next shoot. And for this, we're going to be close to the floor. So I'm going to be down low and Niall's going to be down low. So we've got a couple things to adjust. Our side lights should be pretty good. We just need to increase the power of the light coming from above. We're going to need to move the fill off to the side here so you can see it's already moved there. And because we got some really cool low to the floor stuff, I want to try to get some hard shadows on the floor as well. So we're going to get all of our lighting good to go, and then I'm going to try bringing one of these hard light sources in from directly above to see if we can cast a hard shadow on the floor as well. So if you want to go ahead and get in position, we can start working on our lights.
You want me backfill behind this orange?
Yeah, right around there should be good. All right, there we go, and nice. Cool, so I'm gonna go ahead and take a look at our lights just to see what we're doing here. Yeah, everything looks good. Light on the top could be a little bit brighter, so I'm just gonna increase the top light just a little bit there as well. Our side lights here, I'm going to bring these side lights just back a little bit, and then we need a little bit more fill because you can see Niall's face is getting pretty dark. It's pretty in shadow there. So I'm just going to make sure to adjust this fill light. We're going to point it down a little bit, and all right, we're just going to increase the power a little bit more. So just a couple adjustments here. Here we go. And then whatever lighting setup, like whatever changes you make to one side, I highly recommend just making the same changes to the other side as well when you're doing this sort of like symmetrical lighting setup.
All right. Cool. So we should be good to go. And now if you want to get into the same position. Nice. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at that shot. And yeah, everything looks really good. We can see we have much less dark areas here with the shadow as well. I'm going to increase the brightness of this just a little bit more. Let's just pop up this is just our fill light. Here we go. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this hard light source off for just a minute to see what we can get here. Cool. All right. Oh, damn. You're like, I'm doing something cool. Take a picture. All right. There we go. Looking really good. Our top light looks nice. Side lights. I'm going to just bring up the... Can you get in position again? We're not getting a ton of light coming in from the side. So I'm like, okay, just going to make sure. I think we just have to point these down just to make sure that they're actually... There we go. And point these down and then bring them a little bit further behind as well. And the further back you bring your lights, the more of a rim type effect you're going to get. So the more of like a highlight right around your subject. So just bringing these back a little bit and angling them down should help give a little bit more separation to Niall. You want to try it again? Nice. Cool. Yeah, looking good. So you can see here, I'm just going to flip through these real quick. You can see here are the shots from before when our lights were a little bit more like coming from the side and not hitting Niall as much. You can see we don't have a ton of definition here in this part of his back, but moving on to what we just did, you can see now we have all these little highlights and shadows. And this is really what creates definition. When light scrapes across your subject, that's what creates these little highlights and shadows and things like that. And that's what gives shape and form to your images. So you don't want to point your lights like directly at a person. Normally coming from the side is how you're going to get all these little highlights and things like that. All right, looking good. And I'm going to increase our fill light just a little bit more because his face is still a little bit dark. You can see we're getting a lot of like really nice reflection here of the pink on his skin as well. So you can totally change colors and stuff like that in Photoshop. Just keep in mind, you know, if it's pink here in person, that's going to reflect on a person's skin as well. So if you do change those colors in Photoshop, make sure you change the reflection colors on their skin too. All right, and then now I'm getting nice and low. Nice. Nice now. Cool. Those look really cool.
You want me to go with the same spot?
Let's switch it up. So now we're pretty much at the point where like everything looks good. So it's like, do whatever you want. Welcome back, guys. We are ready for our last setup. I'm super excited about it. We've got some rings set up. I have no idea what you're going to be doing with these rings, but I'm really excited to see. So for these, we're going a little bit more on the abstract side of things. So we're going to be using less light, and most of our light is going to be either backlit or top lit. So we're really not going to be lighting much of Niall's front, like whatever's facing the camera. We're not going to be lighting that very much at all. So the idea here is like black background. Okay, if we don't light the front side of Niall, that's going to be totally in shadow too, so that's going to be black. So the goal here is basically just to see like an outline of Niall with the rings, and we're going to do some stuff with chalk as well. I'm also going to be getting in a lot closer to Niall. This is more like detailed type shots. A lot of the stuff we've been doing was either like full body or like, you know, portrait type stuff. This is just getting in a little bit closer. So with these shoots, it's fun to kind of get both, like big picture stuff, like kind of like your hero shots, like the stuff we were doing, the more like dance moves. But these are just really nice to kind of add into that mix. So again, we're starting completely from scratch here with our lighting. I'm just going to turn all of our lights off, and then we're going to start building everything up from scratch. You ready to do this?
Let's do it.
Cool, let's do it. All right, so we're going to start adjusting the lighting. Let's do some of the lower stuff first. Yeah. Will you be able to do that to the side?
This way?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, cool. So we've got a couple of different things we're going to be doing with the rings. We've got some lower positions just like this, and then we've got some higher stuff. So just like what we were doing earlier, the higher he is, the closer he's going to get to the light that's above us. It's going to really affect the exposure. So we're just going to start with the lower stuff and then move our way up. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with this light here. And basically, you can just kind of hang out there now. We're just looking at our exposure. And looking at the camera is really nice, but I'm also always going to look at my computer screen as well. So that looks pretty good. Let's just raise the power of that just a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and bring in our side light. So this is gridded. It's been gridded the whole time, really. This time we're going to get really, really close to Niall here because I want this to be really dramatic. There we go. And let's go ahead and straighten this back up as well. All right, there we go. And let's see how we're looking here. Nice. And you know what? I'm going to actually lower the power of my overhead light so we can see what it looks like, mostly working with side light. Cool. All right, I'm going to get a little bit more from behind here. I'm going to get into like pull-up position. There we go. And let's just go ahead and lower the power there. All right, so we got our first light. Basically, I just lowered the power a ton from the overhead light. We're gonna see what it looks like basically with just side light. So we've got our key light here, which is this side. I'm gonna bring in the other strip box to get the back side of Niall as well. But we're gonna really lower the power of that. We just want a little bit of definition there. So our main light will be this side light here, and then our fill light is gonna be off to the side in this case. All right, so let's see how that looks with that fill light in there. All right, and in this case, it's actually gonna be in the frame a little bit, so I'm gonna make sure to move that out. There we go, and we'll see how we're looking here. Nice, cool. I think we're looking pretty good. That's pretty much the look that that I want for this. Just like a super Yeah, I think we can even lower the power from the overhead light a little bit. So we're just looking for like a little bit more of an abstract type look here. Nice. Cool. Yeah, I think that's looking really nice. All right, so basically the lighting is done. We've got what we need. It's kind of nice in this case. We don't have to worry about fill light ratios front to back and stuff like that because we want the front of him to be dark. So this is kind of like a general note. Like there's no right or wrong with lighting. Like you can totally not light the front of someone, and that's definitely okay if that's the look that you're going for. So we're just going to move our background a little bit because I'm kind of photographing in this direction, and I'm seeing through the background just a little bit there. And we're going to get our spray bottle and douse you down a little bit, and then we're going to start shooting. So in this case, I think this is our easiest lighting setup yet. This took like 2 minutes to do. So cool. Yeah, we're done with our lighting setup, and we're ready to shoot. So we got all of our lighting basically dialed in. Everything looks really good, and it's time for our actual shoot. So for these photos, we're going to be doing more like headshots for your like website, like about me page. You want like a nice smiley picture of you, LinkedIn, Facebook, or whatever. So that's kind of the goal of these photos. So we still are using like the athletic style lighting because that fits with your brand. But these are just going to be kind of like happy, having fun type of pictures. And then in our next shoot, we're gonna get a little bit more like athletic with the actual shots. All right, cool. All you got to do is just be a cool dude, and stand there. And I'll be a cool dude and push a button. All right, looking good. And there we go. My big thing here, there we go. Just make sure everything looks good. Check it out on the computer. I'm gonna lower the main light just a little bit here. There we go. And that's our overhead light, and take another picture. Okay. So whenever I'm doing like an actual portrait shoot, working with a person, I try my best to not think about or focus on gear at all. Because every time I'm focused on my camera or a light or this piece of technology or that piece of technology, whatever, I'm not focusing on my subject. And that tends to show in the photos. So there's a bunch of really cool things you can do. One thing that you can do that I really like is shooting tethered. So you can actually like have a regular conversation with a person and then take pictures shooting tethered, or you can just do that at the camera. And I don't really tend to look through the lens of my camera. Most of the time I'm just looking at my subject. So just a little thing that may help you get a little bit more of like a natural feeling in your photos. Let's get you facing to the side on some of these. So still like at the same marker, we'll have your feet kind of like facing in this direction, and then you can like turn, so your feet are gonna be here, and then you can kind of like turn around towards the camera that way. So basically what I'm looking for, like first and foremost, like a natural expression with Niall. Like, you know, I just wanna make sure that your face looks like if I'm hanging out with you, like I know what that looks like, right? You don't look like weird or awkward when we're hanging out, right? So I want to make sure that you look like that in the pictures. That's like primary. Secondary, I want to make sure that, you know, like in this case, I had your feet like pointing to the side a little bit. It's just going to create a little bit more interest in your stance. Can you face your chest towards me just a little bit more? Yeah, there we go. So not like totally straight onto the camera, just a little bit of like a change in the stance. And then you can try like putting one like weight on one foot or the other. That's just going to make it feel a little bit more natural as well. So basically what we're going for is just like, you know, make this as natural looking as possible, because this is like a very unnatural thing that we're doing here. So it's like everything that we can do to like make it feel just like normal and natural. That's basically the goal. So I'm going to have you do a deep breath in.
That was cute for relax your face.
Yeah, relax your face now.
Just tell me to relax my face.
There we go. Yeah, that's nice. So after a deep breath in, let it all out, and then right there, right there.
Stop smiling after I do that.
I know, it's a good one. All right, let's do one more together. Cool. And you can look at me if you want.
Okay.
We'll just have
You're
a
gonna make me smile.
nice. Cool. A little smile is definitely, yeah, we want a little smile. So this is gonna be like a friendly type, yeah. There we go. Yeah, totally. And generally, like the longer we do this, the more comfortable it's gonna get. Because at first it's like, obviously it's awkward. You're standing in the middle of a white piece of paper with all these lights on you and a bunch of cameras and stuff. So obviously it's gonna be awkward, but you know, the longer we do it, it just gets a lot more natural. So you're doing great. Generally, I find like towards the end of a photo shoot is when you get the pictures that you actually like. Yeah. There we go. That's good. Yeah, that was good. Cool.
I suck.
Let's take a look at your pictures.
Let's see.
That's the one.
Yeah, star.
That's the keeper. That's the keeper. That's good. I like that one. So basically what I'm looking for when I'm going through the pictures are like a couple things. First is like, okay, are they like, this is a fun photo because you're laughing and smiling, but obviously you're not going to use that. So I'm just going to skip right past that. And then basically I'm just looking for you to be like natural and relaxed and comfortable. That's the main thing that I'm looking for. And that's always going to be in someone's face. You know, like this is a smile where you're doing this, you know, like you're pushing their muscles up in your face. And that's part of a smile. But a real smile is in someone's eyes. You know, you actually don't need to move your mouth at all to smile. It's in your eyes. So like that compared to like, you know, this where like you still look like you're happy and like having a good time, but you see your mouth isn't doing this at all, you know? So that's mostly what I look for is like, okay, does a person look natural? Does it look like they're having a good time? You know, like right on the other side of a laugh is oftentimes like really, really good pictures. Like right before a laugh or like right after a laugh. You know, that's when a person, see even here you're laughing and here you're a little bit more comfortable. And then in the next one, you go back into like, oh, I'm getting my picture taken. Wow. You know, and it's a super subtle change. My big tip for just being comfortable on camera, like for photographers, is like as much of just this as possible. Like, let's get something interesting going on. Let's have a conversation. And then you're focused on me, you're focused on like a normal thing rather than all this other stuff that's happening all around you. So that's a tip for anyone who's taking someone's picture. And then, you know, if you're getting your picture taken, good luck. It's hard, man. It's hard.
It's tough.
Yeah, but the deep breathing helps out a lot. All right. There we go. Deep breathing helps out a lot. Relaxing those shoulders helps out a lot. What we were doing with our hands, that helped.
Shoulder drop.
That was not a shoulder drop? Yeah. Nice. Yeah, there we go. Let's take a look at your pictures. Cool. Oh, it looks good as well. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at our pics so far, and then we can choose our favorite from there. Pretty good. I think that's probably a little bit bigger of a smile than what you probably want for your website or whatever. Nice. Cool. Let's shoot a little bit more. Nice. I'm going to have you kind of like bounce on your toes a little bit. Just get a little bounce going on.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it's pretty good, right?
I like that one.
A little bounce. It's not going to show up on the still photos. I love it. I think this is fun. I'm digging it. I don't know. Let's check out the pictures. I've never done that before. I think those are going to turn out really nice, actually. Oh, that's really cool. I love, you don't like that
It's
one?
like Barracuda or something.
Well, it's definitely, it's very expressive. Yeah, you can just do whatever's natural. That one's good too.
Yeah, I like that look.
Yeah. This during the bounce?
This is the bounce.
There we go. This is a bounce. You can tell. That's where the bounce is coming out. Yeah, I think I like this one the best, honestly, so far. It's really like, it's natural. It looks like you. We still have like some good definition here. So let's go through our other ones and see what we've got. Cool. I like that one too. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at all of our favorites for now. I think I'm still going to go, I think my personal favorite is probably this one where you're looking off to the side. Where is it? Yeah, that one. So I'm just going to dismiss a couple here. Probably that one too. Probably that one too. Yeah, I think these are our winners. Honestly, I really like this portrait of you. I think it's really good. It's natural. You look like yourself. You look like I'm having a conversation with you and you're just kind of smiling. It doesn't look forced. You're not like staring at the camera for no reason. Like we still have really nice definition on, your shoulders and arms and everything like that. To me, it says like sports, like I'm a health professional, like, based on your attire and whatnot. But it's not like, it doesn't like scream it, you know what I mean? It still feels pretty natural. So
Sweet.
So we just wrapped our shoot with Niall. Really, really cool images. We're going, again, mostly for like stuff you can use on a social media profile, stuff that says like, I'm a health professional, I really care about, nutrition and exercise, but not like screaming that at you. Niall and I like went through the images and agreed on our final pick. So big thing with lighting here, we do see all the benefits of using our rim lighting. So his shoulders have nice definition, the sides of his arms have good definition. You can see, nice definition on his face. The fill light coming from below does give us these little highlights in his eyes, which is super important, and it just generally fills in those shadows. So we see a lot of definition. We see obviously that Niall, is into nutrition and fitness, but it's not overwhelming, and that was really the goal with this image. So my main suggestion is, when you're doing a portrait, try to get someone as natural as possible. In my experience, the best way to do that is to focus like less on the gear and more on the person. So we got everything set up with our gear, and then we focused on photographing Niall, and we got some really great pictures. So I hope you enjoyed that little behind the scenes look, not in just our lighting, but the photo shoot as well. And then in a later section, we're gonna be retouching these images and really bringing them to life. You may have to jump like a bunch of times. Is that okay?
Like half a dozen or over 50 times?
Like 20,
Ah,
25. Okay.
just be forgiving.
Yeah. Do your.
He's like, you do that, just hold
Yeah.
that a little longer.
Yeah, in the air. Okay, guys, welcome back to our second shoot with Niall. Thanks for coming in, sir.
You're welcome.
Can I get one of these?
Yes.
We are on a pink backdrop this time. It's going to be really fun. Pink is both Niall and my favorite color, so that works out pretty well. And we're going to be doing a little bit more action stuff today. So we're going to start completely again from scratch. Now, our lighting setup is going to be relatively similar to the last setup, but we do need to make some changes because there's going to be a lot more movement in these photos, and in some of the photos, Niall's actually going to be upside down. We're going to do some inversions. So we're basically breaking this up into two different parts. We've got some jumping shots and then some floor shots, like headstands and things like that. So things to keep in mind when your subject is jumping in the air and you're in a studio like we are right now. We do have a light above Niall, but the closer he gets to that light, the more light is going to get on Niall. Basically, he's just going to get brighter and brighter as he gets closer to the light. So we're basically going to just change all of our lighting ratios, and we're going to start from completely scratch. I'm going to turn all these off. We're going to start from scratch and build it back up, but we're going to basically make sure that when he's in the air, the top light is going to expose him properly, and then we're going to bring in, our sides, we'll bring in our fill, and then we've got another light we're going to be using as our front light just to fill in any like dark shadows. Now, we ready?
I'm ready.
Cool. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and turn off all of our lights. There we go. I want to get to my overhead light here. So the first thing I want to do is just make sure Niall's placement, front and back, is where he needs to be, because he's going to get a lot more light on him the farther back he stands. Like if he's in front of the softbox, he's not going to get as much light. So once you move back just a little bit more, if you don't mind, a little bit more. All right, cool. Come forward just a tiny bit. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and take a picture there. Now we're resetting all of the light settings here. So I really don't know how this exposure is going to turn out. All right, we are shooting tethered. So basically all of it's going to be coming up on the computer, which is really, really helpful. So that looks all right. Now I'm going to just have you do like a small jump and maybe put your arms out. A little bit higher, about the height that you'd be jumping. There we go. Perfect. So basically what we're doing now is just making sure that when he's in the air, he's not going to be super overexposed. So looking at this shot, again, we're starting with like our first light here. We're starting with just one light and kind of building up from there. So looking at this, just kind of zooming in, we have our light is a little bit overexposed. So I'm going to be bringing the power down a little bit. And just like with our last shoot, my camera's stuck on all the same settings. So we'll display the camera settings right down below on the screen right now. So the first thing I know I need to do right now is just lower the power of the light that's right above Niall. So again, I'm using a remote, but you can just change it with your hand if you need to do that as well. So we adjusted the power. Now let's go ahead and take another shot. And now just do the same thing. Perfect. Cool, and we'll just take a look at the shot. Now you can definitely look on the back of your LCD if you need to. If you're not shooting tethered and you just have the back of your LCD, highly suggest using your histogram. Be sure to turn on your histogram when you review the images. If those bars are too far to the right, that means you're going to be overexposed, which means you're going to lose detail in those highlights. You really don't want to be overexposed. So we're looking really good here. So basically our top light is good to go for Niall in that position, jumping. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little mark on the floor here. There we go. So we know that when he's standing there and he's doing his jump, yeah, you'll tear right through.
I just want to be careful.
So that's basically it. That's our first light. So next we're going to move on to our second light here. Let's go ahead and turn it on to start with. Since he's going to be opening up here, I don't want to put the light too far behind him because it's really going to block a lot of the light there. So here's our second light. We're just going to bring this forward a little bit from where it was for the last shoot. So it's going to be kind of coming in almost directly from the side here. Just test that. Okay, and then I want to make sure that this actually points towards Niall. So there we go. All right, so basically now we're just going to do our test shot with our second light. So if you want to go ahead and do your, yep, my bad, I didn't fire it. Cool, looking pretty good. Exposure looks pretty similar to what we've got going on with our other light. And I could actually bring up the power just a little bit there. All right, cool. So you guys get the idea. Basically, we're just building up our lighting, but it's important to look at each light separately and make sure you adjust the power of each light. You always want to start with just one light. That's just going to help you know what each light does so it doesn't get confusing. Because sometimes you'll turn all your lights on and then you'll try to do your light balance and it gets super confusing, like what light is actually doing what. So for this next light, I'm basically going to set it to the exact same power as the other cross. You know what, actually, let me just see if I can just back it up just a little bit here because it's a little bit close to you. There we go. If they're about the same distance, then you can use about the same power there. All right, maybe I'll just tap it down just a little bit because I think it's a little bit closer. All right, we ready? All right, and whenever you're ready. Perfect. Okay, so let's go ahead and review the shots. All right, and looks like our power output is just a tiny bit brighter coming from that side. So I'm just gonna lower the power down just a little bit. Okay, very nice. So our shots look really good so far. You know, Niall's in the air, you can see a lot of muscular definition, which looks really, really good. Side light, again, we're gonna face the same exact problem that we did before. We don't have any light on the front of Niall. So we're gonna go ahead and bring in our other softbox and use that as a fill. All right, guys, so we've got our next light, and it's basically just serving as a fill light. So super important whenever you're using a fill, just make sure it's a lower power than the rest of your lights, or else it's not going to be a fill light. That's the whole idea behind a fill light. It just fills in those dark shadows. So I'm gonna start with a pretty low power. I would recommend erring on the side of like a lower power rather than a higher power with a fill light, and you can always kind of like work your way up. And you'll notice this is pointing pretty far up. And it's because, well, now it's going to be in the air for one, but I'm also trying to like, I don't really need to fill in this area. I want to make sure the light is like hitting this area. So this is not pointing straight out, it's pointing up at an angle. So looks good. We need to bring in a little bit more fill light. So let's just increase the power of that light. Oh, and I missed it. All right, looking good. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. All right, looks pretty good. I think we could use, yeah, actually that's pretty nice. I think we're looking pretty good. So at this point, we're ready to start like doing our actual jumps. And up until this point, like this is a lighting test. And this is like every time I shoot, there's always like a period of time where you just like get your lighting right. So for that, like I wasn't having Niall do like his full jumps because we want you to save your energy, you know. So we're gonna go ahead and start this and just do a couple shots like this. And then we do have another light that we may pull in as well. So now if you're ready, I'm ready.
Let's go.
Let's do this.
Let's go.
All right, cool. Well, I am ready if you are, sir. So, yeah.
I'll do, no, we'll start with this one.
Perfect. Nice. Let's take a look at those shots. So it's a total balance between like trying to get like what Niall's doing on camera and making sure that, you know, like capturing the exact right moment is part of the battle. So obviously Niall's got to get he's got to nail his jumps, but I also have to make sure to capture you at the exact moment you're out. And for that, I recommend pushing the trigger like right before the peak of the movement, which I definitely messed up a few of these times. Nice, these look good. So one thing that I'm noticing immediately is that we don't have enough fill light because you're a little bit higher in these. So looking at these shots, I'm like, okay, cool. I need to bring up my fill light. So let me just make sure I bring up the power of that quite a bit. And we have decent light from the sides. And then I do want to try, let's try a couple with just that fill light. increased in power. And then I want to try bringing in this next light. So if you can do a couple more of those jumps. Nice. Cool. Let's take a look. So basically here we're just trying to make sure that we've got our subject properly lit. Yeah. These look really good. All right, so that looks really nice. Now I want to try one more thing, and that's just going to be bringing in our last light source. Now this guy is bare bulb. You'll notice there's not a softbox on this. A softbox produces a soft light source. This is going to produce a hard light source with a hard shadow. So most of the time you don't want to just use one of these, but in a case where we already have a bunch of softboxes set up, it can be really nice as just a little bit of an additional light, and it can help define features just a little bit better. So I'm just going to bring this to the side here, and we're going to start like kind of testing this out. One thing you want to keep in mind is that because there's no softbox on this, it's going to emit a lot more power than the softboxes. So I'm just going to make sure I start off with a super low setting. Let's go for it now. All right, and take a quick pause there because we switched up our lighting. I'm not going to have him like do a whole lot because I need to see what that actually did to our scene. And we can see that it actually did very little. So we're just going to bring up our light just a little bit. Nice. There we go. And notice this is coming from the side as well. There we are. So it's just adding a little bit more light from the front. And I'm actually going to bring this in a little bit closer to the side here. With these athletic type portraits, you really want to try to avoid putting your lights in front of your subject because it's just going to flatten them out. So I've got this light coming in from the side, and it should serve, there we go. It should just serve to like add a little bit more hard shadows, which is going to like properly define like musculature and things like that. So again, mixing hard light and soft light. Cool, ready when you are. Nice. Nice. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at that shot. So we're going to start to see some shadows coming in to the images. So you can see the shadows here on the right side of Niall here. There we go. And we're going to see a little shadows, like a little bit brighter highlights on the lights and a little bit darker shadows on the darks. And we can see his hand is definitely a lot more lit in these photos than it was in the other ones as well. So we've just brought in this last light, and again, this is a hard light source. It's going to create some hard shadows on Niall. Now, it's actually doing some really nice stuff with the highlights, but it is creating a little bit of a dark shadow on the other side of Niall, basically where his face is blocking the light. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in one more light, exactly the same like this, on the other side of Niall as well, and then should be good to go. We just brought our last light in, which is basically just a mirror of this light. So now we kind of up the amount of lights we're using. This is actually like kind of a lot. We might not wind up using these. I just kind of want to see how they look with a little bit more punch on them. Softboxes are really great, beautiful light, but sometimes especially with athletic type images, it can be nice to have just a little bit of hard punch. So just keep in mind, if you're using a bare bulb light, you're going to have hard light sources and hard shadows. So you're going to see those hard shadows. So again, this is why we added this other one to cancel it out. So I'm ready if you're ready.
I'm ready.
You want to do it?
Yes.
All right, let's. We'll just do a couple more test shots just to make sure, because we did just change our lighting setup. So, yep, ready when you are. Nice. All right, and let's go ahead and take a look at our lighting setup. And we definitely have more coverage here. I think we have a little bit too much fill light now that we have our lights coming in from the side. So I'm just going to lower the power of our fill light a little bit. I'm going to increase the power of that light a little bit, and then we're going to be ready to go. So just feel like it's like the job of a studio photographer is just like always fiddling with lighting. At least I feel like I'm always fiddling with lighting. All right, cool. Let's do one more. Nice. Nice. And let's go ahead and check that out here. Really, really nice. Cool. I think we are good, Mr. Nile. So we can see we have highlights on basically every part of his body, super well defined. Nothing is overexposed, including the white shirt. So this is basically like our starting point. So now that we have this starting point, we can kind of do whatever, and it's going to look pretty good. So from here on out, as long as you're in the air, we're going to get some good photos. All right. And when you move to the ground, we're going to basically have to change everything up. Let's go ahead and jump in and show you guys how to color. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and start off with this image. Let's hit F for full screen, and we're gonna grab our gradient map. Now, gradient maps are just the coolest. I love them. Here's how they work. Basically, you just click here on your gradient, and you're gonna bring up your gradient editor, and we'll just go ahead and show you guys, just kind of click through a few of these. Most of the ones that come preloaded with Photoshop are absolutely useless, but you kind of get the idea. So whatever's on the left side of your gradient is gonna be your darks, and whatever's on the right side is gonna be your lights. And you can add as many colors as you'd like to your gradient map. Like here we have a whole bunch. So you can see our darks are this like blue color, then it goes into the purples, and then it's getting up to the yellows and stuff like that. So this is, you know, by default, we have some photographic toning gradient maps here. A lot of these are, you know, you kind of want to make your own gradients, basically. Most of these are not going to just like be able to be applied like straight out of the box. So we'll show you how to make your own gradients. Super easy to do. And also, we're going to show you how to apply them in a way that looks a lot more realistic and better than this, because this is like, it's okay, but it's not what we're going for. So let's go ahead and start with just a black to white gradient map here. And we're going to go ahead and start by clicking here to add a color. So just click here, and that's going to help you add a color. And then you can click on your color, and then you just kind of select your color. So we're going to go with like a dark, like bluish purple here, down towards the bottom. And I'm gonna pull this one off. So we're just gonna say, you know what, dark bluish purple, you're gonna be down there. Okay. Now here on the light end, let's go with a bright teal color. There we go. That looks pretty good. And I'm gonna pop in, I want a little bit more of this like tealish color. So we're gonna pop this in. So keep in mind that where you are in your gradient editor, you know, here's your brightest point and here's your darkest point. So your brightest point, you wanna be pretty close to here, right? Because it's pretty dark, pretty bright. You know, if you put your brightest point down here, all your brights are gonna be really, really dark. I'm here like right in the middle, so you wanna kinda like bring this up into a way that kinda like fits into there. All right. Let's hit OK. You can always come back to this. So this is not like, if you've never seen this before, if you never used it before, it's easy to get overwhelmed. Like, how do I pick the exact right gradient? Don't even worry about it, because you can just come back here and edit this and change it all around. So no big deal. Now, we do have skin tones in here, so I want to add some red. So let's go ahead and click there. We want to make sure we add this like, you know, orange, like a
deep orange. There we go. Let's look at that and see how that looks. Maybe just a little bit more red with that. Cool. So looking at this, we're going to go ahead and now we can move these around. So we can drag these from the left to the right and kind of see what effect they have on our image. There we go. All right. That looks pretty good there. Maybe we'll just add another really bright, a little bit towards the blue there. All right, so you can see you can move these around and it's going to change what actually gets affected on your image, which is really, really cool. All right, there we go. And let's bring this here. I'm just gonna lower down the brightness a little bit. All right, cool, and there we go. So we're gonna start with this, a little bit funky looking, but we're gonna start here and then we're gonna continue to play with it. So let's hit okay. This is our gradient that we just made, super cool. And once we have our gradient, I'll just go ahead and save this and we'll include this in the tutorial. So we have our gradient map. Interesting, but not looking that great. So what we're gonna do is I'm actually gonna use blend if on a gradient map to make this just visible in the highlights, because oftentimes when you're coloring a person, it's a good idea to color their highlights. Gives it like a really interesting feel. So we're gonna double click here, okay? There we go, and I'm gonna hold Alt or Option and click and drag from the left to the right there. And this is just gonna color the highlights of our subject. It is doing the shadows a little bit, but it's subtle, right? So that's why we have that like orange in there. It's just a little bit more on the subtle side. So let's hit okay there. And now that we have this in here, now we'll go ahead and just refine this a little bit more. So this, maybe we'll just kind of lower the opacity of that there, pull this in. Maybe I'll add like a blue here. So let's go to our like blue and dark blue. There we go. That's looking pretty cool there. All right, there we go. And you can see we can move these around and you get to see everything kind of in real time, which is really nice. So I'm seeing how this is affecting my layer with all of that built in. Let's just pop the saturation down on this just a little bit there. All right, and change my hue just a little bit. All right, so let's hit okay and just kind of turn this off and on and see how we look. Pretty cool. I'm gonna lower my opacity just a little bit, and I think I wanna just brighten up some of these highlights. So we'll click here and I'll just say, you know what, I want you to be a bit brighter. And same here, we'll click there. Just a little bit brighter for you as well. So hit okay there. All right. That looks nice. And we can kind of work on our opacity here. I'm not looking for like the craziest colors ever. There we go, somewhere around there. But something like that looks pretty good. Now that's a pretty good start. I'm gonna just make this invisible real quick. We're gonna go to our channels and I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate my blue channel. There we go. And then I'm going to use, turn this into a selection. So Control or Command click on this. So the blue channel tends to make most of your skin dark, but the reflections and the highlights will be pretty light. So basically we just duplicated the blue channel. I'm turning this into a selection, which just turns the light areas into a selection. And then I can fill that on a new layer with a nice bright color and change the layer blend mode of that. And it's going to bring out my highlights a little bit more, which will be really cool. In a color, by the way. So that's, we went ahead and just duplicated a blue channel, selected it by holding Control or Command, clicking on there. Now I'm going to turn my gradient map back on. I'm going to make a solid color fill layer. Boop. Okay. And you can just choose any color you want here. We'll just show you what it is. The nice thing about the solid color fill layer is you just double click here. You can change your color super easy. And then my selection that I just made in my channels automatically loads up as a layer mask. Pretty cool. So this layer, I'm going to go down to color dodge. All right, there we go. And let's just go ahead and double click here. And I want to make this like a nice bluish Yeah, that's really cool there. Now, if it's like too much or too little of an effect, like in this case, I think it's just a tad too much. That's just our layer mask. So if I hold Alt or Option and click on my layer mask, we'll see that this is what's going to be affected, which is like boss, by the way, using channels to make selections to make layer masks. So nice. So this is what's going to get affected on my layer right there. Oh, I had that Alt or Option clicked again. There we go. So I think this is really nice. However, it's just affecting a little bit too much. So all I have to do, because a layer mask is just anything that's dark is not really getting it affected. Anything that's light does get affected. So all I have to do is just click on my layer mask and hit Control or Command L for levels, and I can just adjust my levels, and that's going to adjust my mask. So if I go this way, it's going to have more of that be visible because it's just brightening it up, right? Which on a layer mask just makes it more visible, okay? Or I can go back the other way, and it's just going to darken it down a little bit, which just makes it less visible. So let's hit OK. And you'll notice that this is getting my background a little bit as well. Not crazy, but it's getting the background. All right, so here we can see this layer just kind of gets us set up here, the gradient map, and then this layer just kind of like enhances that a little bit. So they kind of work together, and you can also adjust your opacity. All right, cool. I like my opacity up there just a little bit more. Pretty neat, huh? So I do like this gradient map that we chose on here. Let's just, we can just turn this off and on just again to kind of see. So it's actually coloring the highlights there. Okay, so that's kind of cool. Let's just double click there. I'm gonna make this color just a little bit brighter. There we go. And then again, you can still come in here and kind of change your values at any time. Yeah, that looks good right about there. And I'm going to lower my saturation just a little bit with that too. It's a little bit on the orange side, so let's pull it a little bit more towards red. All right. There's a battle with saturation at this point. Cool. I think that looks good. You can always change this at any time. Now, I like this gradient. I'm like, oh, cool, that looks good. So I'm gonna just save it. So let's go ahead and click there, okay? And we just go ahead and give it a name. So athletic gradient, looks pretty good. And then we just hit the new icon and it pops it there at the very end. So I'm gonna go ahead and save this out. I'm gonna go to edit, down to my presets. We'll go to our preset manager and we'll go to our gradients. There we go. And then I'm just gonna click on this one at the very end, just this little guy here, and we'll just go to save set, and then we'll just type it as athletic gradient. All right, and hit done. So if you wanna load it, really easy to do. Just click on your gradient tool. You can click up here on your gradient itself and go to load, and then just go to your athletic gradient. It's in the gradient in your project files, and go to gradient, athletic gradient, and hit open. And it's just gonna pop it right there at the very bottom. Okay, so you can just use the exact same one, or of course you can make your own. All right, so let's go ahead and hit cancel. Now, the nice thing about that athletic gradient and the fact that it's using blend if to blend in is I can just use the same one for multiple images. So just click and drag from one image to another. There we go, pop. And you can see it's coloring these images in the exact same way. There we go. And I'll put the gradient map. Just make sure to put it on the top, by the way. All right, so it's coloring these images in the same way. And then we basically need this same color fill layer. So I'm gonna shift, click and drag from this layer and do the same thing on this one. Obviously the layer mask is not correct, right? So what we wanna do is just fill this layer mask with black. So shift delete to fill that layer mask with black. Okay, we make these layers invisible. Go to our channels and then just select our blue channel. So Control or Command, click on your blue channel, and then on your layer mask, hit Control or Command I to invert that. Okay, and there we go. It's selecting out the lights and loading that into the blue channel. Let's do the same thing here. I know it's kind of a lot. So we basically just copied over this color fill layer that's set to color dodge at 88% opacity. We're going to click on our layer mask and make it invisible by filling with black. Then let's make these invisible so we get back to our base image, go to our channels, Control or Command, click on our blue channel, which is it's just basically selecting the highlights. Okay, and then we go back to our layer mask on this layer because it's invisible right now, and invert the layer mask by hitting Control or Command I. Pretty cool. And now, remember on this one we just did a little bit of levels just to make it a little bit less visible. We'll just do the same thing here. So levels, we'll just go over here, pop this just a little bit to the right. There we go. And then the same thing here. So Control or Command L for our levels. All right, and we want to make sure that they all, kind of like fit in the same series. And then the cool thing about this is if I want to change this color, let's just duplicate this layer real quick. If I want to change the color, just double click here, okay? Because it's just a solid color fill layer. I can just change this color at any time. So if I want, if I want a little bit more of like a bluish highlight, I could do that. I can go, in these red, magenta areas. It's not going to blend as well because the gradient map, I colored the highlights a bit on the bluish side. So you just kind of want to keep that in mind. But you can do all kinds of different colors with your highlights. That's kind of like a cool rusted tone. I might probably go a little bit less saturated with that. But that's kind of a cool, like a little rusted, rusty image tone. But this is cool because your layer mask is basically saying this, hey, only be visible in my highlights. So you're now able to enhance your highlights. Let's just say cancel on that and delete that. We'll go back to our original. So we're enhancing the highlights and it's adding a little bit of color to them, which is really, really fun. So we have our gradient map underneath, this just kind of like gets us ready to use that blue. We've got some blue highlights in there already. We've got those like, nice reds in there. We're coloring that. And then we've got our color fill layer set to color dodge right above there. So really, really cool. The great thing now, guys, let's go ahead and I'm just going to turn these layers off. There we go. And we'll click here and turn these layers off. And then we'll click here and turn these layers off as well. So you can see, we started off really great, nice lighting on these portraits, great portraits. I really like them. And through this editing process, now we can make sure that each of these images is edited basically in the same way. And they all look like they're part of a series. And it's relatively complicated color work. It's not that. It's medium complicated color work we did at the end. But the way we did it, we just literally pull the colors from one image to another one, redo the layer mask, and it's like super easy to do. So now we have this like really cool custom coloring on all these images, and it's like, it's perfect for each of them, and they all look like they're part of the same series. So cool. And that's basically our goal here. I love all these images. I think they really came out really great. The color work on them is super cool. And we learned how to edit 3 images basically at the same time and make them look like they're in the same series. So I hope you enjoyed this section of the tutorial. We could have just edited one of these, but I think it was cool that we did all 3 at the same time. Thanks so much, guys. I'll learn you later. Bye, everyone. So
So Niall and I worked together a bunch, and we wanted to do something on like a white background for like websites as well as like newsletters and social. And the advantage of shooting on a pure white background is that it bleeds perfectly into like any website or whatever. So like, you know, you can be here standing with a little bit of text on the side of you, and that's just gonna like bleed really nicely into the website. So we're gonna get all of our lights set up and kind of explain as we do everything, and take some pictures. You'll be able to see like kind of the progress, and basically we're gonna be building up for like athletic style photos. So kind of the main thing here is we want to like highlight musculature and shape and form. So the big thing there is we don't want to light you from the front really at all. We want to like put lights around you, so like light coming from the top and from the sides, and that's really just going to kind of like create like a rim of light around you, make you look like larger than life. We are using Paul C. Buff Einsteins, and there are remotes for these lights. So if you've got other lights that don't have remotes, not a big deal. You just get on a ladder and you know, move things around. And this is going to be our key light. The most amount of light coming into our scene is going to be coming from above in this case. So we're going to start with this light. All the other lights are not set up, and nothing has been properly like dialed in. So the first thing we want to do is get our camera plugged into the right settings, and then we can kind of like get all of our lights kind of talking around those settings. And basically for this camera, I'm going to shoot in manual mode here. And again, my shutter speed, I'm going to have it 1/160. We're going to bump our ISO up to 200, and I'm going to start shooting at f8. So that's pretty much my go-to like camera settings for this type of event. Now, we are shooting tethered in this case, so I'm just gonna basically make sure we can start our tethered capture, and I'm gonna take a picture here on the computer just to see what it looks like, and I'm not really expecting this to turn out. This is basically coming from our top light. Now, I'm just gonna take off the trigger real quick, and we'll take a picture without, there we go. It's almost completely black. So that's the light that's coming in from our ambient environment. There's almost no light at all coming in from the ambient environment. And the reason there, again, is because we're using a fast shutter speed with a high aperture and relatively low ISO. So it'll look good with the flashes, but without it, it's gonna be almost completely black. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the trigger back on the camera, and we're basically gonna start adjusting things. Now, again, in this case, I do have a remote, so I can actually control the, you know, the lighting ratios and things like that from this remote, which is really, really nice. But again, you can just go up and change the settings on your lights if you need to do that. If you are in that situation, I'd highly recommend pre-shooting. Like we've got, you know, Niles here today, like pretend this is your client. You really don't want to spend like an hour going up and changing all your light settings and stuff like that. I'd recommend doing that with someone else, maybe a friend of yours. Try to find someone who's like gonna wear something similar and someone with relatively similar skin tone, because like obviously the light, you know, it's gonna reflect off my skin differently than it's gonna reflect off Niall's skin and everyone else. So that's like in movies, they have like stand-ins and stuff like that. It's basically like, okay, you get all your light right, and then when your actual talent comes, then you can just stand there. First photo is gonna be amazing. So that's just a general tip. But getting back to our lighting ratios, you wanna just stand and kind of look directly at the camera if you don't mind? All right. And this is generally how I will start to work. So looking at the photos, you know, what I'm looking for now is my histogram. So I'm making sure that nothing is overexposed, and I'm making sure that we have enough light on Niall to where we can actually see the light. So you can see we've got light coming in from above, and it's not overexposed. So I'll just increase the power just a little bit more and take another picture. So you can be super duper technical with this sort of thing, or you can just look at it and, you know, go by the feel of the image. Both are totally okay in my opinion. I used to be more of like, you have to use a light meter all the time because that's going to make sure you get the exact right exposure. Now I don't really use one that much. I just kind of go by look. And if you're shooting tethered to a computer, you really have a pretty clear idea of what the photo is going to look like. So it's totally up to you. Again, I'm just go more of like a feel it out type of approach to my lighting now. But definitely, if you prefer more of a technical route, I highly recommend you using a light meter. So what we have now, basically, this is like our main light coming from the top of Nile, and it looks really good. There are a couple gaps with this lighting. So you can see like Nile, he's lit like super well. We've got our light right above him, right? So he's gonna be lit super well on the top of his head, the top of his shoulders. That looks great, but there are some gaps. For instance, the sides of his arms are like basically completely black in this photo, and he's gonna have like dark shadows. I'm sorry, like he's got dark shadows under his eyes, under his chin. So we need to kind of fill that in. Now with like athletic type portraiture like we're doing, you really, really want to stick most of your light intensity. You don't want that to be coming from the front because that's going to flatten your subject out quite a bit. You want that light coming from the sides. So what we're going to do now is pull in a couple soft boxes. These are called strip boxes. They're just long, thin, soft boxes. They're like a strip of light, basically. So we're going to pull a couple of these in from the sides, and that's basically just going to get us like the light from each of the sides. So we'll just do one at a time. Just pull this guy in here, and I'm going to place this like kind of behind Nile. Notice like we're really trying to avoid light in front of our subject here. That's kind of like the main goal here. And I'm just gonna register this on my remote as well. Cool. So now I'm just gonna do like a little test fire, and our light is hitting Nile. So the other thing that I wanna note is this light has a grid on it. This grid is basically, I'll just kind of pull this off here so you can kind of see. This grid is basically just like fabric that is pointed in one direction. So softboxes by their nature are, they're not very directional. They actually spill out quite a bit of light in either direction. So light would be coming out here and light would be coming out here as well. What the grid does is basically focuses the light, so it's just gonna be like going in one direction, in this case, just hitting Nile. That does a couple things. One, it keeps it off the background, which is nice if you don't want your light on the background. Two, it keeps light from entering your camera, so it's gonna help you reduce flare, and if you wanna focus your light, that really helps out there too. So my big suggestion is I kind of just like look, I'm gonna like get near my subject and kind of look at the light and like I'll point it from there. So it's like, okay, I want it to hit Nile, I'm gonna just get there, and then is this pointing at me? Yes, it has just moved it, so it is, and that looks pretty good too. So just do a test shot. Now that's our first light. We're gonna be mirroring this basically on both sides, but let's go ahead and take a picture with our first light just on the one side, and we can see how that comes in. So we see a lot more definition on the side of Nile. Basically, this is what's known as like a rim light. We have a rim of light coming, that's appearing on the side of our subject here. And that's just gonna define him a little bit better from the background. You can see on his right arm here, basically it's just completely black, so that you don't have any definition here. So it's gonna give you some muscular definition. Already we can see like your veins and stuff like that, which for like sports, portraiture, athletic stuff, that's like, it's a plus. It's like we wanna see all that stuff. We're still a little bit dark, so I'm gonna just come around from the back just a little bit more, and we're gonna see if I can light just a little bit more from the side here. And then again, just making sure that it's actually pointing at Nile. So we'll take another picture and basically just take a look at it. So let's just go back to before we were using the side light. This is just coming from the top, and then our side light is putting a little bit of light on Nile's face as well. Now we can see that the light on the side of Nile's face is just a little bit brighter than the light on the top of Nile. So we really want to just make sure that those lighting ratios are right. In this case, we really have the option. We can change the settings in our camera to let less light in, or we can change the settings at our lights. And I really want my camera just kind of like staying where it is. So basically we're just gonna reduce the amount of light that's coming from our flashes there. Okay, so let's go ahead and take another picture and see how that turns out. Okay, so now we have a little bit better of a ratio between the side light and the top light. It looks like more of a continuation of a light rather than being like brighter on the side and less bright on the top. Okay, so basically we were just gonna like step and repeat with the same exact idea. So I wanna try to put this in about the same place here. We have this pillar here, which is gonna kind of maybe get in the way. But is that facing towards you, Niall?
I'd say so.
Yeah, I can rotate a little bit more.
Probably slightly, actually that helped out a lot. Yep.
Yep, cool. All right, so my goal here is basically just to do the exact same thing, you know, with Niall here. All right, and this light is a little bit closer as well, just because I have to put it a little bit closer because this pole was there. So I'll just have to make sure I lower the power of that light accordingly. And are you in about the same place?
Maybe
You're like, oh, I don't know.
just a tad. I'd probably stay right here.
Cool, no worries. So generally what I'll do is put a little piece of tape on the floor. In this case, we'll just go ahead and put like an orange line there. You can put your toes, step back just a tiny bit. There we go. Just so like when you're doing this type of studio lighting, if someone moves backwards or forwards a foot, it really will make a difference. So in this case, we're just wanting to make sure it's about in the same place. All right. Cool. So basically, again, just another test fire just to make sure. One of the other great advantages to shooting tethered here is I don't have to touch the camera, which is kind of fun. All right, I'll increase the power of that new light just a little bit. All right, good deal. So up until now, we're basically just working with our side lights, and these are like what I would call your main lights. In this case, like generally you have a key light that's a little bit higher power than the others. In this case, these three are all about the same. The photos look really good. We have a lot of definition from Niall. You know, he's got the rim light on either side and the top. So we do see a lot of like musculature and like shape is really coming out, which is super important for athletic portraiture because again, you want to highlight someone's shape. The problem we have is the front of Niall is just a little bit too dark. So we do need to add a little bit of light to the front. Now, this is super important. In this case, this light is going to be our fill light. It's going to be less powerful than our main lights. And it's really important that you get this ratio right because you want your fill light to be much less powerful than your main light. Basically like enough light to like brighten up the shadows a little bit, but not enough to start to overpower. So in this case, we're going to bring our fill light in and I'm basically just like going to put a softbox on the floor and shine it up towards Niall. And I'm going to point it up a little bit so it just basically hits the top part of Niall, just your head and chest and things like that. You can do your fill lights however you want. Some people put like a big light right behind their camera. Some people do it from above. But because we already do have our main light coming from above, I'm just going to fill this in kind of coming from below. So let's go ahead and grab that. So we're just basically going to put this right here in front of our subject, and you can see now we have our light that's going to be coming in as a fill from underneath. So I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit higher, and again, my goal here is to fill in the light, you know, thank you, sir, fill in the light in this area and to make sure that his eyes are not too dark. The other nice thing that this is going to do is it's going to create a little bit of a reflection in his eye, which is basically just gives the eyes a little bit more life. All right, so we've got our light in, and now it's time to test it out. So let's go ahead and fire a shot and see how everything looks together. If it's overpowered on the bottom, it's gonna look horrible. And you can see it does look horrible. Yeah, so that's the big difference between using a front light and light coming from the top or the sides. You're gonna have like a super, super flat image. So basically what I need to do is like really, really lower the power of this light. So it's just filling in those shadows. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna lower the power again, take another shot. So looking much, much better. This might be a little bit too bright still. Basically, we just wanna just fill in those shadows. Let me just go a couple back where you're looking straight at the camera. You see how like you don't have any highlights or anything like that in your eyes. They just kind of like look a little bit lifeless and your shadows are super dark here. So moving now to here, it's like you have a lot more life in you. You've got these reflections in your eyes. The light coming from below is not taking over, but it's filling in those shadows, which makes a huge, huge difference. So that's basically the idea here. Now, from here, you can go and tweak things just a little bit more. I'm going to just add a little bit more light coming in from the sides and top. So I do have a remote here, so I'm just going to pump in. I'm going to add like a quarter of a stop to each of these lights, and we'll just take one more. All right. Perfect. So straight out of camera, we're looking really great. We've got a lot of definition here. A lot of the musculature looks really good. Now, in this case, I'm leaving the background just like as it is. I'm not lighting the background. You can totally throw a bunch of lights on the background. If we're shooting on white and we want to cut Niall out and put him on white, and we're gonna be doing that later in this tutorial, it's honestly like super duper easy to just do that in Photoshop. So we're just gonna show you how to do that in Photoshop, cut him out and put him on a pure white background. So that's basically it for the lighting setup. So again, you can do this with your subject if you're friends with them. They don't mind hanging out with you while you do it, if they're your neighbor. Or a lot of the time you just want to do this kind of like, do this beforehand. So when it comes to like our general sports portrait lighting setup, like there's a ton of variation you guys can do on any of this stuff. And again, we're using a medium size octabox as our top light. We're using strip boxes, 60-inch strip boxes, as our rim lights, both left and right, with grids on them. And we're using a medium-sized softbox as our fill, kind of coming in from below. So again, you can do this like tons of different variations, but the big thing about sports or athletic lifestyle, athletic portraiture is you want to make sure that your main light sources are coming from the top if possible. I know you can't always get a light up there, but if possible, I highly suggest doing so. And then you want your lights coming in from the side and then just your fill coming from the front. Okay, so now that we have a good idea of our lighting ratio, let's just go ahead and strip this back down to nothing and build it up so you guys can actually see what this looks like. So we're gonna start off with no lights. This is just ambient light. Then we're gonna turn our light from above on, then one side and the other, and then our fill. So you can see we had a really good idea of what these lights are actually doing. Okay guys, it's time to retouch our images of Niall on the black background holding the medicine ball. And this is gonna be super cool. We've got actually 3 different images we're gonna be editing, and we're gonna do them in a series. We're gonna be doing some really cool stuff with our lighting, and I wanna make sure to show you guys how to like basically transfer the same editing from one photo to a couple in a different series. So that's why we've got our 3 images. It's gonna be a really fun section. I can't wait. Let's go ahead and jump in. So here in Photoshop, we're gonna go ahead and open up our sample images. We're gonna go to our black background, and you're gonna see we've got 3 raw files and then a grunge texture.jpg. So let's go ahead and Control or Command, click on the 3 of those and hit open. And it's gonna pop these up in Adobe Camera Raw. So I'm gonna hold Control or Command and select these. So we're gonna be anything that I edit over here while these are selected, it's gonna do all 3. So first, lens corrections, just enable our profile corrections and remove chromatic aberration. I kind of just do that every single time. Okay, here in my general settings, we're gonna bump up our shadow values just a little bit. All right, kind of a lot because it's not doing that much. Maybe I'll bring our exposure up a tiny bit. When you bring your exposure up, it's gonna bring the exposure up of your highlights and shadows. So you wanna make sure not to go too far, because sometimes what you're gonna do is overexpose your image, and you really don't wanna do that. So I'm gonna go plus 0.15.
There we go. And we'll bring up our shadow level to about there. Let's go ahead and bring our clarity to 10. That's going to give us some mid-tone contrast. And you know what? That looks pretty good. This is a really good starting point. So this is going to open all three images. They're going to be in ProPhoto RGB, which is the largest color space, 16-bit, and they're going to be that size, 22 megapixels. These were shot on a 5D Mark III, as you can see right there. Okay, let's go ahead and open up the images. They're going to open up as separate documents. And the deal here, we're going to start off by editing one of our images, and then we're going to get our coloring in that image. And then we're going to basically take that coloring and apply it to multiple images in this series. And just like we did with the images on the pink background, it's kind of like a back and forth type of thing. When you have images in series, like you'll get this image how you like it, and then you can apply that here, and then you may make some tweaks, and then you kind of go back and forth to make sure, like at the end, they all look like basically they're edited the same way. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm gonna just minus these a little bit, controller command minus to just zoom out here. And we're gonna go ahead and start with our, with this image here. So let's hit F for full screen. We're gonna go ahead and zoom in. And the first thing I wanna do is just do a pretty quick cutout of Nile on this background. We're not gonna do like a full cutout, but we are gonna be bringing in a texture. So let's go ahead and grab our magic wand tool, and it's gonna start to like select things in the background because obviously there's not like a ton of contrast right here. So let's go ahead and bring our tolerance down a little bit lower, maybe a tolerance of 2. There we go, that's looking good. So basically the lower your tolerance, the less will get selected. All right, so a tolerance of 2 seems to be working pretty well. And we're gonna leave Nile on a very dark background here, so I'm not too concerned about making the perfect cutout, but that looks okay for now. A little bit of stuff here we're just gonna have to do manually because these tools are not they're not perfect. That's a pretty confusing little area there. Okay, so let's go up here to select and mask. All right, and basically we're just gonna go ahead and, you know what? I'm gonna inverse my selection. So let's hit escape, go to select, down to inverse, and then we'll go to select and mask. There we go. And I'm gonna go ahead and bring up a little bit of feathering and bring in some contrast. All right, there we go. And I just want to kind of take a look at our edges here. So let's bring up a little bit more feathering. All right, so the farther you go with your feathering, the more it's gonna kind of like smooth that edge, and you wanna just bump up your contrast. There we go. Just to kind of like get your edge back, basically. All right, and this looks okay. Let's go ahead and shift our edge in just a little bit. All right, yep, and that looks okay for sure. Now I'm gonna click on this remember settings because I'm basically just gonna use the same settings for this that I'm going to use on the other images there. So let's hit okay. Now this is not, I'm not trying to make a perfect selection here because again, the only reason I'm really cutting them out is because we're gonna put that textured background on there. Other than that, I wouldn't even cut this out at all. Okay, so now that we have that selection, let's go ahead and click on our layer mask icon. All right. And we're gonna just zoom in really quick here. I'm gonna hold shift and click on our layer mask. That's gonna temporarily disable it. And then we're just gonna grab our pen tool. So P for the pen tool, basically just wanna grab, cut this ball up. And by now you guys know how to cut stuff out. So, if you're like, hey, I wanna cut it out perfectly, that's totally cool, go for it. You know how to do it because we've done it a bunch of times now. All right, and we'll come right around here and hold Control or Command and click right there. So let's go ahead and right click, make that a selection, hit OK, and then here in the ball here, we'll just hit Shift Delete and fill this with white. All right, deselect, looks like I missed an area there. Not a big deal. We'll just grab our brush tool and paint it white down there because it's, goes right to the edge there. All right, and I'm just holding shift and clicking on my layer mask. Looking pretty good, pretty good. Not a mask that I'm gonna enter into the international masking competition, which does not exist. But it's fine for what we're doing. All right, there we go. Let's go ahead and select that around there. Make selection, hit OK. There we go. And then we're gonna just click here, hit Shift Delete, and fill that with white. All right, and then here we'll just fill that in. Cool. So that looks totally decent for what we're doing. Now let's go ahead and I'm gonna zoom this out just a little bit. We're gonna open up our next image. So let's double click here. I'm gonna go to my grunge texture and we're gonna hit open and hit OK there. All right. So now that we have this cut out, I'm gonna go ahead and load up a black background. So we'll go to solid color. We'll go all the way to black and pop that underneath there. Okay. And then we're gonna put our grunge texture in here. Let's hit OK. All right. And you can see it's a little bit on the small side. Not a huge deal here. We're just gonna make it a bit bigger. It's gonna be pretty subdued in the background there. So I'm not super worried about if it's a little bit larger there. All right, now let's go ahead and desaturate this. I'm gonna hit Shift Command U, which just strips all the color out there. And then Controller Command T, we're gonna flip this horizontally. Yeah, let's flip that horizontal again. It looks all right. It's a little bit uneven. It's lighter over here, darker over here. Not exactly what we want, but it's okay for now. We're gonna change our blending mode from normal down to screen, which is just gonna get rid of the darks. There we go. And then I'm gonna go ahead and load a levels on this. So let's pop this back to normal real quick. I'm gonna convert it to a smart object. So we're gonna right click, go to convert to smart object. If you have a blend mode on something, when you convert it to a smart object, it applies that blend mode onto the smart object. So it's much better to go to normal and then convert yourself to smart object and then do your blend mode. The reason I converted this to a smart object is because I'm going to use levels, just Control or Command L. Now, this levels adjustment is not actually on there we go, super subtle. This is not an adjustment layer, okay? Adjustment layers, you go to layer, down to new adjustment layer, and then you go to levels, and they're their own thing. And then I could clip this if I wanted to. You could go create clipping mask. Basically would do the same thing. So levels adjustment layer clipped to this, and I can do my levels here if I want to do that as well. Or a smart object with just a levels adjustment on it, you can still turn off and on. Generally, if I'm just gonna do like one levels or one curves adjustment, I'll just pop it into a smart object and then just do the levels or curves, and then that just like puts it as a smart filter. So you can do it either way. I have all of the non-destructive functionality that I would have with using clipping masks. It's just a little bit cleaner because instead of two layers, one of them is clipped, we just have one layer. And you can click on this little down arrow and expand it out if you want to. And especially because I'm going to be using this background on a couple of images, I'm like, you know what, let's just keep things simple. So it's a little bit confusing. So just to show you guys, there's layer, new adjustment layer, and here's your list. So this is going to create that new adjustment layer. It's its own layer. And then you have image adjustments, and it's basically the same thing. This doesn't make its own layer. It'll apply it directly to the layer you're on. And if it's a smart object, you get to use smart filters so you can edit that later. If it's not a smart object, it just sticks it right on your image, and that's destructive, okay? That's gonna destroy your image. I mean, not destroy, but it's gonna be like stuck onto that layer. So a little bit confusing. This is, applies directly to your layer adjustment layer. This creates its own one. Okay, there we go. So there we go, just a little bit of background texture, just for a tiny bit of interest there. And I'm gonna just duplicate that. So Controller Command J to duplicate it, right click. Let's actually hit Controller Command T, right click. I'm gonna go to flip horizontal, and I'm gonna flip that vertical so it doesn't look the exact same, and put it over there too. So now we have one over there, and I'm just gonna lower the opacity a little bit. All right, so that's kind of the idea there. We just took, basically this background, popped it on black, and then got both sides going on there. Okay, and obviously I can just adjust these opacities at any time and adjust my levels. Okay, cool. So that's a pretty good start. And again, when you're doing this, obviously I didn't know I was going to use this texture when I first started. It's just one of those things that you're going to experiment along the way. So now that we have that, let's just do the same process with the other images in the series. We're going to go pretty quick doing that, but that's just basically going to get us all at the same starting point. So we'll go a little quicker here. There we go. Let's go ahead and select this select this gentleman out. All right. There we go. Just using the magic wand tool and holding shift here. All right. And you can see pretty gnarly selections there. Not the best, but I think it'll be just fine. So now we'll go to select down to inverse, select and mask. It's going to use the same settings. So totally cool with that. Hit OK and pop that as a layer mask. All right. So obviously we got a little bit more cleanup here, but won't be that bad. So I'm going to shift click on our layer mask, which is going to temporarily disable it. All right, and hit P for the pen tool. So start off just going right around here. There we go. And again, if you'd like to cut these out, you know, you can use the pen tool on the whole thing to cut them out. That's totally okay. Whatever method you'd like to cut people out or objects, that's 100% up to you. All right, Control or Command, drag that down there. So in this case, I'm just going to right click. We're going to go to Make Selection there. Okay, and then here on my layer mask, that's all black on the layer mask. It's all invisible. We're going to go to Select and then Inverse. Okay, and now I'm just going to paint white on my layer mask right over here. See, that's pretty well defined for me right there. So that's, you can see it. It might have looked like, whoa, that's going to be a lot of work, but a lot of that's already defined. So it's really not that much work. All right, cool. So that looks okay there. Obviously, we've got some work here. So let's hold Shift and click on our layer mask again. So P for the pen tool. Start up in the corner. It's nice to start in the corners. Kind of gives you like a good starting point with the pen tool. All right. And if you ever need to, like if you can't see what you're doing, what you can do is you can create like a levels adjustment layer on top of everything. And you can use that just to see what you're doing and then just delete it when you don't need it anymore. All right, cool. Right click, make selection. I'm going to do that, in fact, because I'm like, I can't see what I'm doing. So let's go here. I'm going to create like a levels adjustment layer. We're just going to, let's just delete this layer mask on there. Levels adjustment layer, just make things a little bit brighter. You can see, there we go. Let's go to window, down to our paths again. All right, back to our work path. So you can see I got it a little bit wrong here. Not a big deal. If you want to add to a path at any time, by the way, just go ahead and select your path. You got your pen tool there. You can just hover right over any place and click, and it's going to add a point, which is super cool. So I'm going to hold Control or Command, and then there we go. Kind of pull that in a little bit there. All right. That looks good. So let's right click there, make that a selection. And again, this levels adjustment layer here, that's only on there, you know, so I can see what I'm doing. That's not going to stay. All right, cool. So now that inside is already black, so I just need to inverse my selection. So we'll go to Select, Modify, or Select and then down to Inverse. And then I'm just going to paint white right here. There we go. And all this area becomes visible there. All right, cool. So you can see we just cleaned all that area up there. Let's shift click on here and turn my levels back on, and P for the pen tool. We're going to start here, go right around here, hold Control or Command, and bring it up to about there. Okay, and now we'll just go right around here and circle on up. Let's go ahead and make that a selection. I'm going pretty quick here, just because we've done this already. There we go. Oh, interesting. Okay, let's go ahead and right click here. We'll go to make that a selection. Okay, so make sure to paint white inside of the selection. There we go. And then we'll paint black outside of the selection. All right. And I'm going to hold Alt or Option, click on my layer mask, and then there we go. We'll just kind of go in here with our pen tool. As you can see, this is what it looks like with the levels adjustment layer on. With it off and on a black background, you're not going to be able to see much. But I do want to do a little bit better of a cutout with the hair because we are going to see that. So let's go to our channels. We'll go to our red, green, and blue. Pretty similar in this case. We'll duplicate our red, and I'm going to use my levels and just make the lights a little bit lighter, make the darks a little bit darker. Control or Command click to make that a selection, and then here on my layer mask, let's just paint white on my layer mask. All right, which is making the light area a selection. All right, and that's doing okay. Honestly, it's not doing that great of a job. I think we might be better off by using, let's go back to our magic wand tool here. There we go. Let's go ahead and just lower our tolerance a little bit more so you can see. There we go. That looks all right. Let's inverse our selection. Shift Command I to inverse your selection. And then I'm going to paint white right here. All right. So it's going to make it look a little bit gnarly there. All right. Definitely not a perfect selection. On our layer mask, I'm just going to use my blur tool real quick. Just like blur this edge just a little bit here. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and pop a background on this. Now I'm going to zoom out here. Let's get out of that guy and go back here. I'm going to just basically use the same background. So I'm going to shift click those layers and drag them from one image to another and then put those below my subject. All right, and you can see we are looking pretty good here. Okay, so like visually, it definitely looks exactly like how we want it to. It's not a beautiful, beautiful mask, but in this case, it's totally okay. I am going to go ahead and crop this a little bit. So C for the crop tool, let's crop it in a little bit, and then I want to push Nile in that direction as well. Make sure delete crop pixels is unchecked. Okay, that's just going to make sure that it's not going to cut off like this background texture, for instance. All right, and then we just move these over, bonk, just like that, and there we go, looking really good. All right, so we've got one more image to do in the series. Let's go ahead and select out, F for full screen, and there we go. Let's go back to our magic wand tool. There we go, and we'll bring our tolerance up just a little bit. All right. There we go. 5 looks pretty good. That kind of got everywhere. And you can do your tolerance while you're actually selecting 2. So I'm going to bring my tolerance down to 2 here, and now we'll go ahead and select out some of these areas. Oh. All right, that looked okay. We'll just take care. You know what? We'll just take care of these areas, these internal areas. We'll just do that with the pen tool. Won't take that long. So let's go to select and then inverse. Selected mask, we'll just use all the same settings there. So let's hit OK. Pop that on a layer mask. There we go. And then again, I'm just going to grab a levels adjustment layer. Just make things a little bit brighter so I can see them. And then we'll just come in here with the layer mask. Or with the pen tool, rather. All right, there we are. Kind of fun editing 3 images at the same time. because this happens a lot. I find that I'm making images in like a series, you know, quite often, whether it's personal work or client work. It happens a lot where it's like, okay, cool, these 3 images are going to go together. Let's make sure that they're all edited the same. Let's make that a selection, hit OK, and on my layer mask, just fill that with black. All right. Back to our pen tool. Alt or Option to bring that over there. All right. Okay. Make that a selection, hit OK, fill that with black. And I think we got one more little area. All right, almost done here. And this is definitely the most tedious part of the tutorial, by the way. So we're starting off with the most tedious part. All right, make that a selection, hit OK, and fill that with black. All right, well, pretty cool. Let's go ahead and turn our levels adjustment layer off. And then, you know the deal, we're just gonna grab these layers, background and then our color fill, or background and then the texture rather. And then we're just gonna bring them in again. So same exact deal with those layers. And let's just go ahead and zoom in here. I'm going to add a little bit of variation here to the layer mask. Just around the hair here. That was the only hair area that, there we go. Okay, pretty cool. So that really didn't take too long. Now we have 3 images in the series and they're all on the same background. And if I want to kind of like change this up a little bit, you can most definitely do that. Like maybe I'll just, on this one, I'm gonna right click and make that background black, by the way. On this guy here, I'm gonna hit Control or Command T and just kind of like bring this up around there. All right, there we go. And then this one on this side, because they looked like the exact same. So I'm like, okay, let's do a little bit of variation there. There we go. And kind of bring that in there. All right, now anytime you do a rotation like that, you just want to be sure that, like if I select this, you can see that is now the border of the image. You just want to make sure there's not going to be like a line there. So the best way to do that, just make your subject invisible and then grab like a levels adjustment layer, pop it on the top there, and then make your lights lighter. So you can see there is a line there now, right? Not a big deal. You just pop a layer mask on there, choose a large soft edge brush, and then paint black right at the edge. And you know, your line just kind of fades away. But just something to look for when you're doing this, because if you don't know to look for that, you may not see it on your computer, but you may see it on a screen that's calibrated differently, and you may see it in print. And that's just a big sign of like, oh, you didn't double check to make sure your texture didn't overlap in a weird way. Ooh, mistake. Anyway, so it's not a difficult at all to fix. I just wanted to give you a little hint to like check it. All right, there we go, looking good. Let's go ahead here, make sure we check this. So just make your subject invisible real quick, grab a levels, take your white point and just drag it, you know, left to the right there. Okay, so that looks good, you know, because they're just overlapping. Yeah, there's nothing to look out for there. And let's take a look at this one. So go ahead and make our subject invisible, grab our levels, and make our lights a little bit lighter. Ooh, got some overlap there, huh? Let's grab our levels adjustment, or our layer mask rather, paint black right on the edge. Just a large soft edge brush, just kind of helps fade it in. There we go. All right, cool. I'm just fading this away just a little bit so it's a little bit more of a natural transition. large soft edge brush with a relatively low flow. And there we go. We just took care of that issue there. All right, so then you just delete your levels adjustment layer and turn your subjects back on, and you're good to go. Okay, so that's the most tedious, the most technical part of what we're gonna be doing throughout this tutorial. So if you hung out with me for that, you're doing really great. So now we're gonna jump in, we're gonna do some exposure adjustment, dodging and burning, we're gonna do some sharpening, and we're gonna get some really fun color work as well. So let's go ahead and start off with our Athletic Portraits 1.cr2. So let's zoom in. I like working in full screen, so you can hit F at any time to get to full screen. So here's these images, regular. F is gonna get you full screen. F one more time will be full screen without any menus. This is how I like to work, just one full screen. And I'm gonna right click on my black background and make that black, just so I can see a little bit more clearly what I'm doing. All right. Cool, and we're looking good. And then this one also, you know what, I'm just gonna go ahead and crop this a little bit different. We're gonna add a little bit more space on the left there. So it's just C for the crop tool, kind of a click and drag type of deal. And then these layers, we just wanna make sure we move those. Let's change our background to medium gray real quick, just to be sure I'm covering the whole screen. There we go, which I am. All right, and that looks pretty good. Yeah, I'll just do dark gray on here. That looks good. So zooming back in, I do need to take care of the hair here a little bit. So I'm just gonna use my brush tool, just a soft edge brush. Just make sure that paint white on the layer mask here where it's visible. And because the background is really, really similar to the background that the subject is photographed on, it's really not that big of a deal to have like kind of a fuzzy layer mask here, because you're not going to see it. Basically, it's going to look totally, it's going to look totally great because it's basically the same background. All right, there we go. And the hair looks better there. All right, cool. So now what we want to do is just a little bit of work on the light and dark levels of my subject. So that's going to be some dodging and burning. Let's go ahead and jump in, and we're gonna start a little bit of retouching on Nile as well. I'm gonna go ahead and grab the layer Niles on the group here. We're gonna bring that to the left, and I'll just leave this other group visible. Why not? I think it looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and start retouching. So I'm gonna zoom in. By the way, cool keyboard shortcut here. If you never used it, hold down the space bar, and then you can hit Control or Command. So spacebar first, then Control or Command. Gives you a little magnifying glass. You can click and drag to the right, and that's gonna zoom in. Left is gonna zoom out. So if you're over here and you wanna retouch his forehead, bonk, zoom in, here at his forehead. Bonk, here at his chest, wherever you want. So it's just a really nice way to navigate around your image. I really like doing this. Okay, so before we get started, I'm gonna create a white glow right behind Nile because it is a gray background. Now, let's go ahead and I'm gonna shift click on Nile's layer mask so you can see here's the original image. And we did have a little bit of a glow behind him. That's because our light from overhead is creating a little glow on the background there. And you can see we did photograph Nile on a white background, and that totally would have worked. But this is so much more versatile. We can create any size we want. All right, let's go ahead and recreate a little bit of a glow behind Nile. And we can do so by creating another solid color fill layer. I'm going to go all the way to white. So you can see, isn't that nice? We could just put him on whatever color we want. There we go. I'm just real excited about it. I love that. Okay, let's go all the way to white here. Now on my layer mask, I'm going to hit Control or Command I to invert our layer mask, making it black. So we got a gray color fill layer and a white color fill layer. Okay, now let's hit G for our gradient tool. So the gradient tool, we have a couple options here. We have a linear gradient and a radial gradient. We're going to click on our radial gradient. Okay, then we're going to go ahead and click here on our gradient editor, and I'm going to make sure we're on our foreground to transparent gradient. So you can see it's our foreground color. In this case, it's black to transparent. So that looks good. So we can see up here, black to transparent. Now, our layer mask is already black. It's making this layer invisible. So we want to switch this to white. So I'm going to hit X on my keyboard. Remember, X switches your foreground and background colors. So still foreground to transparent. We just changed our foreground color. So it's white to transparent now. Okay, and I'm going to click in here and just drag out. Boom. And we got a really nice white glow right behind our subject that I can turn off and on. And I can move this around too if I want. And I can change this color if I want to. Now you got a really light pink glow, which looks weird, but if you wanted that, you could have that. Okay, so there we go. Basically, kind of recreating our background, just with a lot more options there. And if I shift-click on this layer mask, now we're on a pure white background again. Okay, so let's go ahead and start retouching our subject. Now, because we've started down the path of clipping, we're going to continue down that path. You know, everything that we do to Nile, let's clip it to him. So let's go ahead and create a new layer. I'm going to hit Option-Command-G, and that's the keyboard shortcut for clipping, by the way. So you can right-click and go to Create or Release Clipping Mask, or you can hit Option-Command-G, and if you're on a PC, it's going to be Alt-Control-G. Okay, so let's go ahead and zoom in here. Now, we're going to be using our healing brush tool. So let's go over to our regular healing brush tool, and I'm going to just start sampling. There we go. And painting to get rid of some of our like little blemishes and things like that. There we go. So you can use the regular healing brush tool, which is what I'm using here, or you can use your spot healing brush tool, in which you don't have to sample. So let's go ahead and try that. The spot healing brush tool, you don't have to sample with the spot healing brush tool. There we go. You just paint over little blemishes. It just kind of takes care of it for you. You don't have as much control with the spot healing brush tool. So sometimes I prefer to use the regular healing brush tool. For instance, if it gets the texture wrong, because it just kind of pulls texture from wherever it thinks it should. And oftentimes a lot of the times it's right, but sometimes it's like, that doesn't look that great. Now, things like defining features, I'm going to totally leave defining features on my subjects, especially with like athletic type portraits, because that really makes a person look a little bit more who they are. So you can see we've got a little line right there, a little maybe scar right there. So we're just going to leave those things. But little, like skin imperfections and pimples and that sort of thing, we can take care of all that sort of thing. All right. And it's going to be up to you and up to your client as far as like what they would like removed from their skin. Some clients may be like, yeah, I have this mole on my face. Can you get rid of it? And you can say, sure. Or they may say, don't get rid of it. And you can say, sure. All right, so I'm zooming back in and out using that same keyboard shortcut I told you earlier. And this just gives me a really clear idea, because sometimes if you're super far zoomed in, you kind of lose the forest for the trees. You pay attention to a lot of little stuff that winds up not making really that much of a difference. So
I like to zoom out, you know, and then take a look at like what's kind of like distracting me overall, and then zoom in and kind of take care of that. Bonk, and then zoom out and kind of do that same thing over and over again. All right. Not, you know, not a hard technique here. It's relatively simple. Most of what you're going to be working on here is, you know, deciding what to keep and what to remove. All right, and you can see I'm not going overboard with this. If this were a like beauty type image, if this were a photograph for like a makeup company or whatever, definitely a lot more retouching. And you can check out our tutorials, retouching 101 through 301, if you're into like super duper retouching. But for this type of portrait, you know, we just want to do some general cleanup. All right, that looks great. Looking good. My Nile. I was just gonna say Nile and then my came out. So yeah, you're my Nile now. Let's do a little bit on clothing. It's really surprising, but you know, photographing someone wearing like relatively new clothing really can make a big difference. And also steaming clothing could make a big difference. So we have a steamer here at the studio. So before the photo shoot, we steamed all this clothing. So if you can, you know, just get all the wrinkles out, because that sort of thing really does make a big difference in your photos. So you're like, why does this not look like quote unquote professional? Well, if you got a bunch of wrinkles in your clothing, that's one thing that's gonna kind of hurt you there. All right, well, that looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and zoom in here. You can see I'm just gonna turn this off and on. So we didn't get rid of everything, you know, but just a few little pores and little distractions like this most definitely helps out. So you can do this on the body as well. Now, in this case, we have like some stretch marks here on Niall's arm. There are all kinds of trends that happen with retouching and beauty. This will change from year to year. This also changes depending on where you are in the world. Right now, it's the end of 2017 in the United States, and stretch marks are actually considered a beauty trend. They're right now they're coming back into style. It's becoming more popular to leave stretch marks in photos, and some people are even adding stretch marks, which is you know, you can have your own opinions on that. So we're going to leave them here because that's a current beauty trend. Now, you may be in a different part of the world, or you may be watching this a few years from now, and it may no longer be a trend, and you may want to get rid of them. So in that case, you just use the same tool, healing brush tool. There we go, and just paint right over them, and you can get rid of some. So very easy to do. I'm going to leave them in. I don't mind them. You know, I teach retouching, but I actually like people looking natural. So, you know, I'm just going to leave them in. But if you want to get rid of them, just use the healing brush tool. All right, there we go. We're looking really good. I'm going to see about removing just this little bit of highlight right up there. It's just a little bit distracting for me. So same tool here. There we go. All right, that looks really good. So the next thing that we're going to do is work on just brightening our subject's face just a little bit. It's on a pretty light background. It looks good. There's nothing like wrong at all here, but we can bring a little bit more light into his face. That's going to help out a little bit more. So let's go ahead and grab a curves adjustment layer. We're going to go to layer, down to new adjustment layer, and over to curves. Let's hit OK. Now you can clip this as well. So regular layers can be clipped and adjustment layers can be clipped. And even in adjustment layers, you get this little clipping icon. So you can see that that's going to clip it right there. All right, so let's go ahead and bring this up just a little bit. There we go. Now, what I want to do is a couple of things. I'm going to invert the layer mask. So Control or Command I to invert this. Okay, and then we're just going to paint white here on our layer mask.
especially like over the eyes. There we go. I just want to brighten that area up. Obviously, this does not look good. If you think something looks good and you're close, my suggestion is to zoom out and look at the overall, you know, and we can see that it definitely looks a little bit out of place there. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to change how this blends into the image. And basically what I want to do is just brighten up my shadows just a little bit with this layer. So we're going to double click right here outside of there. And we have our layer style here. And here within our layer style, we have where it says blend if. We have a couple options for this layer and the underlying layer. Now we're going to choose the underlying layer. Basically, I'm going to make this invisible where we have our highlights. So to do that, I'm going to hold Alt or Option and click here on my highlight area and drag that to the left. So you can see here, it's just going to disappear from my highlights and it's only going to show up in my shadows. Okay, just a good way to blend. Now you can do the other side. If you want to disappear this from your shadows and only have it in your highlights, you can do that too. Okay, so hold Alt or Option and grab that guy and pull it to the left. So here you can see just bringing our opacity up and down here. It's going to be a lot more of a natural effect. Okay, so here's our preview. That's just brightening everything. And with our blend if activated here, you're going to see it's going to be a little bit more natural. So there we go. It's just going to brighten up the shadows a little bit. I can zoom out and see. Looks really natural. Much more than before. Let's just hit the before and the after. Before and the after. Okay, so we just brighten up our shadows. Now we can continue to do that just a little bit with some dodging burning. Now technically, anytime you lighten or darken any of your photo, any part of it, that's considered dodging and burning. Dodging and burning is not like one thing. It's a description of lightening or darkening part of your photo. So you can do that like a million different ways. Okay, so that's one way you can do it. Now another way you can do it is we're going to create a new layer. I'm going to use my brush tool. So B for the brush tool. We're going to paint with white. Alrighty, and I'm just going to paint white here underneath like his eye right there. So we're just going to paint white right here. I've got a soft edge brush, and I'm going to use a flow of about 20%. All right, so I can just build up an effect over and over again if I want to. That's what flow does, which is nice. Okay, now this layer here doesn't look good, so we're going to change our layer blend mode from normal down to soft to light. And that's just going to kind of add a little bit of softness to this. Soft light is like a really nice nice blending mode when you're dodging and burning. All right, and that's just going to help me kind of lighten up these areas here right under Niall's eyes there. And we'll just do some. So this would be considered dodging, okay? Making areas just a little bit lighter. All right, I'm gonna just make my brush really nice and small and go around his eyes. All right. So, you know, big tip here when you're doing this type of dodging and burning is you want to make sure you're using a low flow on your brush, and that's going to help you build that effect up. Go over the teeth a little bit. Looks good. All right, and just kind of zooming out and see like, okay, maybe this could be a little bit lighter there. You just kind of paint over it and paint over it until it looks how you want it, and then you just stop. All right, you can erase away if you want to a little bit. And that looks good. So let's just turn that off and on. And you can see we just brightened up some of those areas just a little bit. And most of the time when I do this sort of thing, I tend to overdo it just a little bit. So what I'm going to do, and what I suggest you do as well, is just lower your opacity a little bit of that layer. So we're just going to lower the opacity. And that usually helps things to just kind of like look a little bit more natural. All right, so let's go ahead and zoom out and take a look here. Remember, this layer was overall with his face, and then this layer was some dodging and burning. So we just turn those off and then back on. It's just going to kind of put a little bit more light on Niall's face and just make the portrait look a little bit more friendly. And again, the goal here is not to try to change someone's skin color or anything like that. I'm super against doing anything like that. It's basically just like putting a little bit more light on there. All right, especially if someone has dark shadows under their eyes or whatever, dodging and burning is going to really help out with that. All right, so we're looking really good. Now we can basically take those same principles and apply those to the rest of his body to kind of enhance highlights and shadows, which will enhance form. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that again. I'm going to create a new layer, and we're going to go ahead and clip that to our subject, and we're going to start doing the same thing. So we'll change our layer blend mode from normal down to soft light. Okay. Painting some highlight areas, and you want your brush size to be about the same size as your highlight area you want to enhance. All right, and then you can hit X on your keyboard to switch to black, and now you're going to be burning. So dodging is with white, and burning is with black. And I suggest using a pretty low flow here. All right, and no reason to go overboard here. How much you decide to dodge and burn is totally up to you. It's a stylistic choice. There's dodging and burning for like, general enhancement, and then there's dodging and burning for like, wow, let's make this person look super dodge and burn. I know I've done different things based on what I thought was appropriate for the image, and also based on current trends, and also based on my own personal taste at the time. Sometimes I like things to be a little bit more subtle. Sometimes I like things to be less subtle. And these choices that you make, that's your own style. You can do clothing as well, which clothing usually looks pretty cool. So let's just turn this off and on here so you can see we're enhancing the highlights and shadows a bit. Not going overboard with it, but, definitely making some difference there. All right. Just going to darken up his eyebrows just a little bit and then kind of lighten up right above there. And every image has got its own purpose too. These images, we want Niall to look like friendly and approachable and, health professional, right? So I'm not going to make it like super duper gritty, right? If you're photographing someone, let's say an American football player, and you want to make them look like they're very mean and a don't mess with me type of person, then maybe you go a little bit more heavy with your dodging and burning. All right, and I'm just using this to kind of even some things out as well. Looking good. I recommend going subtle with this sort of thing. You can always build up your effects later, but looking back at my personal history of retouching, anytime that I've gone and done like a super retouched image, I'll tend to look at it a couple years later and be like, ooh, I went pretty overboard with that. It's obvious that I had just like found a new tool and I was just like, wow, look at this, what I can do. Which is fine, but generally if I go on the subtle side, I'll appreciate that years later. right, so I'm just going to back off the opacity of that a little bit. So here we have some general dodging and burning on our subject. So again, the goal is to help your subject look a little bit better. I'm, doing my best to define the arms and chest and that sort of thing a little bit more, but nothing crazy here. All right, now that looks great. And overall, we look really good. We did lighten up the face a bit, and so we've lost a little bit of contrast in the face. We have our shadows are relatively light, and then our highlights are light, but they're not super light. Like they're not much lighter. So I'm just gonna add a little bit more contrast back into the face. In this case, because our background is super light colored, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a little bit more lights to my highlights. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. We're gonna create a new layer. Let's clip that. We're gonna use our brush tool, and I'm just gonna paint white on my paintbrush here and just right over top of Niall's face, just here on the top. There we go. Okay, you look like a weird superhero. Let's double click here. And what we want to do is I want to tell this layer to not be visible where the underlying layer is darker. So let's hold Alt or Option, and I'm going to click here and drag from the left to the right here. Bonk. Okay, so you can see how cool is this? This is just a white paint on a layer. Okay, and then we're going to go from the left side and then go right to about there. And then we can change our opacity here, right? So I don't want to go completely white, somewhere right about there. It's just going to add a little bit more highlight. There we go. Just the top part of Niall's face. And that's going to add my contrast back again. So I'm not darkening anything. In fact, I'm making those highlights a little bit lighter, you can see. But it's given me that contrast, much needed, just a little bit more contrast. And that really helps to define that portrait pretty well. So let's go ahead and turn all these layers off. So we can see this is kind of where we started with our portrait, relatively straight out of camera. We did some adjustments in Camera Raw, so keep that in mind. All right, and turn those on, and this is where we ended. Okay, so any of these layers you can then kind of adjust your opacity afterwards. Like that curves adjustment layer I thought was just a little bit strong, so I can kind of adjust that afterwards. You can shift click on a layer mask, by the way, and that'll temporarily disable it. And now I can see what would this look like if we applied it to our whole image. There we go. And then you can simply paint it white anywhere you want to. But I think that looks pretty good. Maybe I'll just paint it a little bit lighter, a little bit more visible, like right around the edge too. Okay, so this is the benefit of working non-destructively, is you can turn these layers off or on at any time, change your opacity, mask them away, do really whatever you want. Okay, great. Well, we're almost done here. The next thing we're gonna do is sharpen a few of our key areas. We actually have a really great set of actions available for sharpening, and we'll include those with this tutorial. So if you wanna check those out, it's a really, really great way to sharpen. All right, so I'm gonna go back into my Finder here, and we're gonna click in our project files. I'm gonna go to my actions, and then we have this learnsharpen.atn, which is really great. Let's go ahead and double click there, and this opens the action and installs it in Photoshop. Super cool. Basically, if you wanna get to your actions, just go to Window and down to Actions, and then you can see we have Learn Sharpen, which is really great. Now, with this action, basically all you have to do is you have a few different options here. You just click on one and hit the play button, and basically it just does all the work for you, which is really nice. And this is obviously different levels of sharpening there. Okay, so a sharpen +1, there we go. We could just turn this off and on, and we can see what that looks like. So it just gives us a +1 sharpen on our entire image. Now, you don't have to apply this on the entire image, just make this visible and invisible. Okay, that looks pretty good, like as an overall. So again, we want to clip this to our subject, right? Just right click, we'll go to create clipping mask. That looks pretty good. Now let's do, I'm gonna do a sharpen +3, and we'll have that visible just over the eye. So sharpen +3 and hit play. Basically how this works is it makes a copy of your image and then applies a high pass filter on that, and then sets your high pass filter to overlay. There we go. So now we're just gonna go ahead and mask this in. So I'm gonna hold Alt or Option and click on my layer mask.
Okay, and then paint white on our layer mask here, just over top of the eyes, and it's gonna really apply some nice sharpening, you know, just the eyes, like quite a bit of sharpening, really. We'll do the teeth as well. All right, so let's go ahead and close our actions down and take a look from right about here and see, there we go. So there's the before. Let's go ahead and pop these closed real quick. So there's no sharpening and then overall sharpening. So this guy, probably can't see it that well. This guy just overall sharpens, which is nice. And then this one is just on the eyes. All right, so we'll just turn those off and on. So off and then back on, pop. Just gonna add some nice sharpening, which is really great for sports, athletic types portraits. And then obviously we draw a little bit more attention to the eyes. Now, if you don't wanna do that, not a big deal. You can actually just create like a new layer. Let's clip that. And then you can use your sharpen tool. So like you can go to your sharpen tool, it's under your blur tool. Let's make that a little bit smaller. And then the sharpen tool, you just kind of paint where you want to sharpen. And the key here is just, you know, keep on going until right before it looks bad, and then you just stop. And you want to make sure you're on sample all layers up there. And if you go too far, like I'll just go too far right there, you'll know because it's going to start looking like this. All right. It's like, oh, that looks horrible. Not a big deal. Just hit E for the eraser tool and just erase it away. And then just, you know, start again. There we go. So if you want to use the actions we're including, that's great. Enjoy them. You can use them on any tutorial you'd like. If not, you can just use your sharpen tool. And you can see that's, you know, sharpening right there. So either way, and you can even add those together if you want to. But I'm just going to use the sharpen action. All right. Well, I think we're looking really, really nice. I think Niall's going to be happy with this portrait. I'm happy with it, and I think we've got a great representation. He looks happy. He looks approachable. He looks like a fitness professional. And again, we have this on a great background that's very, very versatile. So let's go ahead and turn all these layers off. So there's our original, there's our before, and there's our after with Niall. I think it looks great, not overdone. You know, relatively natural. We've got our little text in there that I just made for fun. And then again, if we want, you know, obviously we're going to save this out as a PSD. So let's go ahead and save that. Shift Command S. Okay. And I'm going to just create a folder in here called PSD. There we go. And hit save there. So make sure we obviously save this as a Photoshop document so we can come back at any time. You deliver this to Niall and he's like, oh, that looks great. Hey, I'm making a web page that has a pure white background. Can you change the background to pure white? You just go back into this file. You just go create a solid color fill layer, go to white, boom, and save it out, and you're done. So that's why I really like this. Okay, guys, well, that is our, it's already saving. That's why it says that. So that's our edit of Niall on a white background. I'm really happy with this portrait. I hope Niall's happy with it. And I hope you are also happy with what you learned in this tutorial. Thanks so much for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next section. Bye, everyone.